Last week, I couldn't figure it out. And I asked all my friends that are in the business and cover teams and analyze the NFL, what gives? The Cincinnati Bengals team had checked every box this year going into this game. And yet, they were significant underdog. Number one, I thought they would succumb to Super Bowl hangover. Last year, kind of a magical season, difficult division. Ravens are always good. Steelers defense is very good. Browns got a new quarterback. Granted, Deshaun Watson wasn't going to come in until late in the season. But, I felt like the Bengals would take a step back after last year's Super Bowl. After 0-2 start, anything but. The Bengals proved that they had staying power. They were not focused on the wrong things of the offseason, maybe like the Rams. Instead, they were focused on finishing the task. Number two, they got better as the season wore on. All of the losses they suffered in the division earlier in the season, they validated with wins against those same teams later on in the season. So their early loss to the Steelers, the early loss to the Ravens, the early loss to the Browns, they vindicated all of those and got better as the season wore on. They had momentum. They had not lost since Halloween. They had beaten the best teams in the AFC. They beat the Kansas City Chiefs. And they had the Bills at home in Week 17. And in receiving the opening kickoff, went right down the field and slayed the Bills' defense. Just killed them. Right down the field, scored a touchdown before that game was postponed. The Bengals' defense was of very high caliber and coordinated really, really well. The Bengals were largely healthy. Burrow is healthy. Chase is healthy. Higgins and Boyd are healthy. Hayden Hurst is healthy. Joe Mixon's healthy. Samaje Perine's healthy. The defense largely healthy as well. They just had problems on the offensive line where they dealt with injuries, obviously, late in the season and lost Jonah Williams last week. But they had dealt with shoddy offensive line work last year to make a Super Bowl. I didn't get it. I didn't get how the Bengals had passed all of these tests and then went into this game on Sunday as a 6-point dog. Early in the week, really right when the Bills and Bengals game was set, I think the line opened up as the Bengals were underdogs by 3.5. And I jumped on it. I said, this is no brainer. I said, I think the Bengals are winning this football game. And so early in the week, I think it was about 3.5. As the week wore on, I assumed it would slide back. That's the best number I would get. And it would go toward closer to a pick'em. That it would end up maybe Bills by 1.5 or something. It went the other way. 3.5 to 4.5 to 5.5 to when I did Sunday Morning Football yesterday. I was doing the lines with our friend Larry Hartstein, our Vegas virtuoso. I said, the line's now Bills by 6. Now, on Friday's show, you heard me. I took the Bengals plus 5.5, but I said I think the Bengals will win this game. And all of those things that I mentioned about the Bengals were answers to a test. The Bills hadn't passed any of those tests. I mean, the Bills, they were the ones that consistently got to a big spot of the playoffs and then had a bad play, or could build a big lead in a regular season game and gag it away, have bad red zone turnovers, had defensive lapses. That was the team that there was a lot more questions than answers. Add on top of it, whatever the spiritual and emotional toll the Damar Hamlin thing has taken from them. And I thought that this game is the Bengals game to lose. The Bengals are a better football team going into this game with less questions, and they've done it. They've won this game before. They've won an AFC championship game. They've fallen behind at Arrowhead and won. And I said the only reason I think this happened, well, I guess it was two parts. The Bengals didn't look great last week against the Ravens, and that tricked some people to thinking they weren't as good as they are. But that was really about the Ravens' defense being a terrible matchup for the Bengals, and the Bills' defense wasn't nearly as good as the Ravens' defense. But number two, that we never saw this game played. If the Bengals and Bills game had been played, if Damar Hamlin did not collapse, I think the Bengals would have won that football game. This game would have been in Cincinnati. And I think it would have been evident that night. Hamlin's collapse, of course, short-circuited everything with that game. But the opening drive, the Bengals were ready. They were ready for the Bills. And they cut right through them for a touchdown. No resistance whatsoever. They would have done that all night. They would have won that football game 31-17 or something, and we wouldn't have wondered, and it wouldn't have lulled people into a blind spot about the Bengals. That game not being played tricked people into thinking the Bills were actually the better team, and they weren't. They weren't. They haven't been for the last month and a half. 2 months. And the Bengals had the ultimate motivation. Had that game been played, they would have beaten both the Chiefs and the Bills. They would have beaten the two best contenders of the AFC this season. If that game was played, I think the Bengals would have won and they would have had wins over both. And instead, and they knew they had the Bills. They knew it. They knew they were better than the Bills 3 weeks ago. But instead, they had to listen to the NFL sell tickets to an AFC championship game in Atlanta involving a team that wasn't them. Now, we never deal with this. It's not like yesterday the Niners had to deal with the NFL selling tickets to an Eagles and Cowboys NFC championship game. But the Bengals had to hear this. It's not the Bills' fault. It was it was just logistics. But the NFL had to put into play a neutral site AFC championship game. Which site would host? How would they distribute tickets? Where would fans be sat? How could you acquire tickets? All of that stuff was in play, and the Bengals had to hear about all of these plans without them. And they knew they were the better team. They know they're the better team than the Chiefs. They beat the Chiefs. They were in the AFC championship game last year, and they beat the Chiefs then too. They know they're better than both these teams. And they had to hear all week about plans for an AFC title game that didn't involve them. I went into yesterday's game, and I'm rarely like this. I use FanDuel. I enjoy wagering. I think it's a fun puzzle to play. But as you know, my picks at the end of the season were not very good. Rarely do I double down multiple times on one pick. But I saw the Bengals earlier in the week at 3.5, getting 3.5. I said, I'm taking them on a money line. By later in the week, by 5.5, I said, I'm taking them again. Yesterday, they had an early lead, and the line was still only Bengals by 2.5. I said, I'm laying money on them again. I said, I'm looking at a team that's better than the Bills, and they keep getting points on this. I parlayed them with 3 other picks. It was the one weekend where I said, this is the pick that I feel most confident about. And I can't believe the number. And the Chiefs better watch out. Because, again, the Chiefs have figured out a way to kind of mind bleep everybody else. Well, the Bengals beat them in the AFC title game last year at Arrowhead, and they beat them this year in Cincinnati. They're not going to get mind bleeped by the Chiefs. If anything, it's vice versa. The Bengals know they're the better team. They know they're the best team of the AFC. And doesn't mean they'll definitely win. It's not always the way that it works. But the Bengals lurked around the AFC all season as the best team. And because that Bills game wasn't played, we didn't have the hard evidence late. And it lulled people into thinking they weren't. And you're going to end up seeing this. It was just the Ravens game was a bad matchup for them. They survived it. I think they're going to the Super Bowl. I think they're going to Kansas City and winning. And I don't even need to know Mahomes' ability. Clearly, that is a big part of this. But I have felt since mid-October or so, that's the best team of the AFC is the Bengals. I felt that way for a long time. We'll see. Again, you could be the best team and there's a tip ball and it's intercepted, or there's a big play by the Chiefs that just breaks a game wide open and, suddenly you lose by 3 points, but this Bengals team was severely underrated coming into the weekend. And whereas you had the same pick on Friday, we did the picks, and you also picked the Bengals plus 5.5, and you also said, like I did, you would take them on the money line. You also sniffed that Cincinnati was going to win that football game.
Yeah, I thought they had at least the better quarterback in the game, and I knew that they knew how to handle the moment from a year ago. They were not going to shy away. And how could you trust anything Bills related after everything we've seen in the postseason last year? I had to see it before I could believe it with the Bills, and I've seen it with the Bengals.
Here's the question. How do we view Zach Taylor? Because even me, who has said that I think the Bengals have been the best team of the AFC for about 2 months now, I still have a hard time completely embracing Zach Taylor and saying that he's a great coach. But yesterday, he definitely won the coaching matchup. He's going to go to back-to-back AFC title games. The team is balanced. It's not just one or the other. It's not just Joe Burrow. Now, they're incredibly well-built. The roster's excellent. I mean, when you see T. Higgins going downfield and making plays like that, and you're like, that's not even their number one target. Right. It's insane. Irwin drops a pass. They've got like 5 great pairs of hands that, you can make big plays, but Hayden Hurst was great.
Right. And they lost their tight end from last year's run in Uzoma, and Hurst has been awesome.
Right. They're a really good roster, but it makes me wonder whether I need to start reassessing Zach Taylor with more respect.
I think yesterday you could make a case, coaching-wise, that was his best job in a big spot, and I know what they did defensively, but just in terms of what they went through on that offensive line, to have that game plan and that offense, which his hands are all over, that prepared to play what has been a decent enough Bills defense on the road in bad weather, and rise to that occasion where it wasn't even a thought through the first quarter. You just knew they were going to hum along and have them with that much confidence. That, to me, I think you could make a case just from a strictly coaching perspective is better than his fingerprints on beating the Chiefs a year ago.
I think that's fair. They fell behind 21-3 in the AFC title game last year, so it certainly felt like they were not ready for that moment and didn't know how to slow down the Chiefs. And then the defense made some significant adjustments seemingly, and they held the Chiefs after that to just a field goal. And it did feel like Burrow kind of willed the team back into that game. You had the screen pass that went for the touchdown to Samaje Perine before the half that kind of got them life, and then they found a way to adjust in the second half. Yesterday was a really impressive game plan by Zach Taylor.
And let's be real, too. The Bengals did, and you just mentioned, did get screwed here in a lot of ways by having to play this game in Orchard Park. And under the circumstances in which that situation developed, he made sure that his team continued to handle itself with such class and do all the right things. If anything was going to be said, he was going to say it subtly. He kept that team together in the right way possible when, let's face it, they shouldn't have been playing in Orchard Park yesterday.
It's true. There's a lot to admire about the Bengals. Number one, when the Damar Hamlin thing happened, they didn't throw a fit like this game has to be played. That was a home game for them. That was an enormous home game that at the time could have decided home field advantage and the bye in the AFC playoffs. And they didn't get that game played. They didn't get that chance. And then we found out that any tiebreakers for neutral sites did not benefit them. It only benefited the Bills. They knew they had the Bills there, and they understood. Let's do what's right for the players. We're not going to play this game. We're not going to play this game this week. We're not going to play this game the next week. And you're right. All the permutations of how that unfolded screwed the Bengals, and they didn't say anything about it. Of course, they weren't happy. They voted against what ended up happening. But the players and the coaches, they weren't openly griping. It was just like, now we got to take care of our business. And they clinched the division week 18. They beat the Ravens last week, and it was just like this. Now we get to prove that we're the best team. And, if Damar Hamlin doesn't happen, it might have been the Bengals as the 1 seed. That was still in play on that night. And Instead, they were playing on the road in Buffalo and now on the road in Kansas City. So they definitely have a chip on their shoulder because of how all of that unfolded. When we come back here on the show, the Eagles destroy the Giants on Saturday night. What's the takeaways for Daniel Jones, Brian Daboll, and are the Eagles the best team left? DA, CBS Sports Radio.
You're in a 5-minute break.